Hello, everyone. Welcome to our special episode 100 of TankCast. I'm one of your hosts, Arielle, and my co-host and co-tank, Sunnier, set up this whole elaborate thing for us.
Yeah, we're trying out the whole live tank podcast thing because I thought it would be kind of a fun thing to do for our 100th show. So there might be like some rough edges, some technical difficulties. Um, Hopefully it all comes together.
Yeah. Well, like we both used to do like live stream podcast shows
Yeah,
many years ago.
and now it has to be easy, right? Now Discord does it. Uh,
I know, right?
so I'm hoping it's like I do have very specific memories of like constant technical difficulties when doing podcast stuff in like 2014 with Skype.
Yes.
But I mean that was 4 years ago. Technology has to have improved.
Yeah. Like I remember, yeah, because we did a similar thing for the Druid show for like back in 2011 or even earlier, like 10 or so. I don't know, whenever we started. It was many
yeah,
years ago.
yeah, a long time ago.
Yeah. So, I mean, recording audio only podcast is significantly easier than it used to be. That's great. I don't know anything really about streaming, so I watch lots of streams. I don't know anything about doing it myself. So here we are. So we're going to talk about. I'm going to do like a brief history of the show because we're also like sort of in the area of our fourth anniversary of the actual show itself, give or take. I don't remember when the show actually started. I know it was in.
Like
Pretty sure it was in 2014.
2013, 14. And that was even
Um,
before my time.
yes, and it was late 2014. It was after Blizzcon. I know it was before Christmas, so we're in the area of the fourth anniversary, which is cool. So we'll talk about that. We haven't talked about BlizzCon yet because we haven't done like an actual like non non guest show since BlizzCon, and it's like
We haven't done a non-guest show forever, and it's
it's true.
kind of
Been a long ass time.
yeah,
That's
and
a
it's
historical term.
yeah.
And then we'll talk about a bunch of mythic raid bosses that we haven't had the chance to talk about in literally months. So here we are.
Yeah. So I guess
And
let's get started with the origin of TankCast.
yeah, so it's kind of a funny story. I mean, everyone starts out saying that, right? Here it starts out in BlizzCon 2014, and this is the year that I like pretty much met everybody mostly. Um, and 2014, I spent a lot of time hanging out with Thek. And that was really fun. And at one point during the con, I think we were in the Hilton lobby or something, and I asked. It was Thek and I, and some other people. I think Mallory was there, and some of the people that I don't really remember. And I asked Celestlon if if we had a podcast, would he come on and talk about tank stuff? Um, and like tank design and class design and that sort of thing, because that kind of show basically just didn't exist, and nobody talked about tanks pretty much at all. And it was something that I thought was missing from the podcast the Warcraft podcast sphere. And I'd convinced Zach that it would be fun to do a show if he didn't have to do any work, which was fine. That makes perfect sense. So
And that was like even one of my real life friends, like he played WoW back in the day, and he's always asking me like, oh, do you remember that guy Thek? And it's just like this whole like random universe colliding thing, because it's like, oh, this casual friend of mine who played a paladin in 2014 like remembers the guy who started this podcast I'm doing.
yeah, I was like, Thek's actually a friend of mine, so it's like
Yeah.
things like that are kind of weird. um, so yeah, and then after BlizzCon ended, we all left, and eventually, like, a couple weeks later, I emailed Thek and was like, "So I guess we should start the show." Um, and we started it somewhere in the neighborhood of holidays 2014, and it started out like really hardcore theory crafting focused,
Because
because
that's
that's
like,
what we both
yeah, both of you were hardcore.
that's what we were both doing at the time. Um, and it was a lot different than it is now. Part of that is just due to the overall game design has changed so much that hardcore theater crafting is mostly like I don't say it's mostly pointless, but like you can get most of the knowledge you need just by kind of looking at things and making looking at things, playing with them yourself, and just kind of making intuitive judgments. Back then, there actually were like really cut and dried things you wanted to take or not take, and that sort of stuff. There's still like dead talents still exist, but back then it was much more. Dead talents were much more hard, much more defined in the ways that they were dead or not dead. Anyway,
Well, I feel like theory crafting has just changed so much in the last 4 years. Like now
yes,
it's very like SimCraft. There's usually like a, a team ish sort of people who work on it, or at least the
yeah,
Discord informs it, and so it's just like so much like more minute. Like theory crafting used to be like this big macro sense of like, oh, you want lots of stamina to reduce crushing blows or whatever. Uh, and now it's like, okay, here's the specific artifact, or
yeah,
like smaller scale things that like really don't affect your macro play so much, just kind of micro play.
yeah, and like even speaking of Syncraft, like um, Thek basically built a tank module into Syncraft, and we haven't even have a couple of people in our guild that do a lot of like I know a lot of people probably know the name Healover. He's a Windwalker in our guild. He does a lot of coding for Simcraft. And one of our mages has actually recently picked up tinkering with the APLs for mages in Simcraft. Um, and we our guild has always inherited lots of Theorycrafter people, but
Yeah,
anyway,
they end up here.
yeah, that's true.
We say bear retirement home, and really it's like bear adjacent retirement home, as in people who maybe used to play druids who are still like in the game theory crafting for or theory crafting for non-druids years later.
Yeah, it's true. So yeah, that's how the show started. We like had some really like hardcore mathy um, shows early on. One of the very first shows we did was about like how your eyes behave in relation to UI elements on the screen.
Oh, I
Effect did a
love
really good
that
job
show.
explaining about that.
I
Explaining
remember
that
that.
to me. And it was really cool. But what ended up happening is Thek ended up quitting WoW early in 2015, like partway through Blackrock Foundry, and that kind of left me with a show without someone else to talk to, which was really. I mean, make personal choices. Sometimes real life gets in the way of things. Sometimes you just don't like playing the game anymore. Whatever, it doesn't really matter. But yeah, Thek ended up quitting, and I kind of thought about it for a while, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And then I realized that you used to be on a podcast
Yeah, like it
of
just
your own.
similar timing. Like I used to be on Monk Meditation, which was like a similar podcast to what we're doing right now, but more elaborate, with like intros and everything, and everyone had like the lower third of their names, and then I stepped back from that podcast because I decided to join Bear Retirement Home, and the rating times conflicted with the times we were recording. Um, and then just like in a relatively short time span, it's like, well, Tank or Thek's leaving TankCast. Let's see what that like. Maybe this is meant to happen.
Yeah. So I was like, well, this actually makes more sense because one of the problems when we were talking about rating counters that I frequently run into between Thick and I is that we sometimes did the same job, so it made it hard to talk about the fight as a whole. We ended up sometimes we'd end up talking about the same part of the fight from two different points of view. Whereas something that we're able to do, which I think is really cool, is talk about tanking the entire fight
Mm-hmm.
because we're both in it and
Yeah,
covering all the tank jobs,
and like
almost
sometimes
all the
that
tank jobs.
means we don't get to cover as many strats, but I feel like, I mean, six like it's it's a win either way, and it's nice to see both strategies come out.
Yep. Yeah. So I asked you to join the show, and then here you are.
Yeah.
And we've been doing this for several years, like 3.5 or more years at this point. And over time, we both stopped really caring about hardcore theory crafting a lot, and the show kind of evolved to reflect that, I think. And we care more about now, like, is something fun to do? More about is something fun, and less about like what stat weights you should be using.
Yeah, I think that's just eventually you play this game so much and you realize how trivial a lot of that stuff is.
Yeah.
Like it's important, but it's like to a 5 or 10% importance, and really, I'm old.
Yeah, like
like
the people to whom that sort of stuff would make a difference rate at a higher level than we do.
yeah,
And ergo, they're not really the audience for the show. So catering to them doesn't really make sense. Whereas we can talk about things that we've done, and kind of describe them for the audience, the people coming after us, in a way that might make sense. Now, it's not to say we don't like have much more progressed guests come on the show. Like the last 6 guests we had, 4 of them were in the top 20 of the world, actually.
yeah. It still amazes me.
Yeah, and we're about to have on our upcoming our next show. We're doing the retro, and the boys are back, so it's even more of them. So it's not like we don't get that point of view. It's like for the day-to-day show stuff, we just cater to the general population as opposed to like the tiny fraction of the percent, because we already live in the tiny fraction of the percent that like gets cutting edge, right? So there's even a tinier fraction of percent that get it before we do.
Well, and you know what? I still kind of laugh at the whole it started because we wanted to get Celestalon on. And it wasn't that was a constant theme. Like I even had a running list of questions to ask Celestalon, like the theoretical day this ever happened. And I would update it like over the years slowly. And it wasn't through lack of effort. It was really just like it takes like PR work to get that done. And it's like
we don't care.
We're just like a casual podcast. We're not like the Instance or something that like this is a devoted thing.
Yeah. We don't put as much effort into like the networking and marketing side of things as we would need to in order to make that happen. And that's by design. Like we wouldn't be doing the show if we didn't like it and didn't enjoy doing it. And it's like doing all of that extra work is not fun. Like it's just not. So I just don't want to do it, and therefore I don't. And here we are.
Yeah. And now Celestalon works on Hearthstone, so it's like a moot point. The CMs sort of. That we were
there are like
there are other devs.
There are people in his place that I know that we could talk to instead about similar topics. And full disclosure, I have talked to some of these people at Blizzcon, and I do so every year. But you just have to go through this. You have to get through to actually have someone on the show. You have to get through the gatekeepers, and they don't really acknowledge the fact that small little podcasts like ours exist. So,
yeah, it's a lot easier to get like world first tanks on our podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
Blizzard developers.
Exactly.
So should we talk about BlizzCon since that kind of
probably
came up?
since we're already doing that.
There wasn't like it was a fun con. I got to meet a lot of people. And
I think I don't know. I didn't really get into BlizzCon this year. If that makes any sense? It was kind of just for me. I don't know.
Oh,
I don't
yeah.
know why.
Yeah, it's hard because BlizzCon is very much like a huge group of people who are generally introverted, um, like trying to socialize, and then like, oh, we have a lot of these skills that have not necessarily built up, so it's just like showing up at one of the hotels in the area and being like, all right, who wants to talk to me? And then people are like, sure, I want to talk to people, but how do I find them? And it's so like we've been at this for 12 years or however long BlizzCon has been going, and there's still not a really smooth situation to handle that.
No, there really isn't.
um
Uh, to
so that's hard.
Yeah, and to break from the topic real quick, Scientist Bird. Probably not. I mean, I don't know. We still talk to him a lot, like on Twitter,
Oh
and we
yeah, there's
always
a question in our chat. So now that we've given up on trying to get Celestalon, will he finally show up? I wish.
No, we're still like both of us are still good friends with him, and we always like run into him at BlizzCon and talk and stuff. So it's just he works on a different game now. That's just kind of the way it is.
Yeah, his understanding is like the same as ours now.
Yeah. But yeah, so like it was also very, I want to say different. It wasn't actually that like because there was the whole big thing about added security measures, right? Like there was a big public notice about it saying, "Hey, security's increased this year. Make sure you get there early." Blah blah blah. They were obvious and there. Like the checkpoints existed clearly, but it wasn't really that big of a deal to get through them. In my
Yeah,
experience,
like the only place where it was an issue was lines and like getting into the con before the opening ceremony. I know, and I heard a lot of people had trouble doing that. We kind of like preemptively gave up, so we're just like, we're gonna
yes,
go to the Hearthstone stage, which is like on the far side of the whole like huge building. And we're figuring like, you know what, that's probably the chillest crowd to hang out with. I don't play Hearthstone, but I really enjoy the cinematics, so like
yeah,
let's go there, and that was fine. But I know people had trouble getting through security in time for the bigger stages.
yeah. We heard crazy stories about the front doors being like an absolute gong show. But we didn't have any problems, and we ended up hiking back and forth a lot between the two areas because like a lot of the panels we wanted to see were on like opposite sides of the convention center.
Yeah, like that, and like the Dark Moon Fair, which is where you go to talk to like devs, and they have like kind of the nitty gritty of actual development for games, is just completely opposite of where like it's a 10-minute walk from like where any of the big flashy stuff that happens with games is announced. So
Yeah. But yeah, speaking of that sort of stuff, I think one of the big highlights for me was definitely the WoW voice actor panel. That was great.
oh
Love that.
yeah, like sometimes it's hit or miss, but this time it was, I mean,
It was this time was better than the Overwatch one, I think.
yeah, this one was amazing. Where they came out and ended with the voice actress for Jaina singing
Yeah, Laura
her
Bailey did a lot
Warbringers
of
song.
things. Yeah,
Oh, and she's like dressed like in the
yeah,
robes, and they've got like the guy with the guitar in like the three sea shanty singers there.
yeah. It was great.
That was a
Yeah.
highlight.
As for like any of the kind of stuff that was announced, I mean, we got peeks at like all the new content coming in patches past 8.1. Going
Like
to
the
lots of crazy
Ashera
places.
stuff, uh, which like seems super exciting, but it's so far away, and it's like we're still like, okay, gotta focus on Tides of Vengeance.
Yeah, here's the thing that I'm really confused about. Did this is that's different from the Sea of Storms thing, right? Because there's supposedly like the two boss thing
Right? Yeah.
under who's it? That's different than a jar, right? Or did they take the two boss raid and turn it into the jar raid?
I think
I was never
it's
really.
different. I think the two boss raid is kind of leading into the Ashar raid. And it's
Oh,
supposed to be
okay.
more like a. I mean, this is all my like headcanon of their
Yeah,
plans, but In my brain,
That would make sense
that's like the
story-wise.
TOC, like, or was it TOC? Odin stuff.
Yeah.
Like the kind of transition raid where it's really short. Maybe it's really hard. I don't know.
Yeah, but it would make sense if they're linked together because um, the the whole Shrine of Storms, the dungeon, is all like that. All builds up to like it all hints at builds up to Azura, and the whole Azoth not Azoth thing. And if and that whole area isn't really finished, like in terms of storyline. So if the small raid there makes sense to it would lead into the Azura raid later. If that even still exists, who knows?
Not so far off.
And then of course there's the big like faction conflict raid that's still coming.
Yeah, and like the mega dungeon, like Karazhan, but
Yeah,
with gnomes.
the gnome kind of you're not really too hyped about the whole
They creep me
steampunk
out.
mecha gnome.
Uh, like the little gnome people, but they have like metal bits. I don't know. I
Yeah,
really like their hairdos. If it's just like their little cute face, that's cute. But like I don't know, machines merged with humans is creepy. Hi, pup.
okay. Yeah, okay. So the two okay, so the two boss raid is separate from the Azure raid. Okay, that makes sense. Um, and then there was like they're doing a whole bunch of new island stuff. There's the
New
whole
Worgen models, which I'm excited
yes. I
about.
know a lot of people are really excited about the Worgen models. We had like a former top 20 mage join us because he wanted a chiller experience, but also he switched to Alliance just for the Worgen.
Oh, really? That's what.
Yes.
That is why I originally went Alliance was for Worgens, no joke. So I am excited about that. I had to figure out what character I make a Worgen again because I like swapped them all around, and now it's like I'll solve that bridge when I come to it.
Yeah, and you may end up. I mean, you could also decide you want to play warrior.
I know a warrior can
Um,
be everything. They're just the best.
um, but yeah, so that's all coming in the new uh, content patches. Future after 8.1. There was wasn't there something else that I'm missing? Um,
um, like a
right,
new
the gnome
world
thing is a new
zone.
continent.
Yeah.
Um, and I feel like there's something else, but I don't really remember. But anyway, whole bunch of new, like, I feel like this is likely going to be, like, in terms of pure non-raid content, like, the biggest expansion we've ever had. Like, it feels like it's going to be bigger than Legion in terms of
Yeah.
non-raid content.
That's pretty ambitious.
Uh, but, I mean, just from who knows how much of what they actually talked about will come to pass, but uh, when I was sitting there, I was like, man, this is a lot of stuff.
I
So
know, it just kept going. They're like sitting up there, just like, all right, this is happening. Next patch, here's like little tidbits for like beyond that. Just like, oh,
yeah, exactly. It was a lot of stuff.
was
And
there
I
any other
think
BlizzCon stuff?
I guess I'll mention something very briefly. So, and some of the devs I talked to, I asked them specifically about Guardians, and Guardian utility, even more specifically, and they were pretty positive about Ursula's Vortex having a big impact in Mythic Plus. And when we talked to Max last week, he seemed to agree with that. But one of the things they're still struggling with ever since affinities became a thing is how a lot of a Guardian's utility is locked behind shapeshifting, and shapeshifting while tanking is a problem. And as we trend like more and more towards encounters where you're always tanking, that becomes less and less of a thing you can actually do. Which means you just artificially lose a bunch of your utility just because, which feels really bad. And it was.
It kind of seemed like they're
They know it's a
okay with a
problem. They're
lot
trying
of
to solve it.
losses, but not complete loss. So that they're okay with on a fight basis where it's like you can't use your affinity here because that happens. Sometimes classes can't use an entire talent row, really. So
Yeah,
they were totally fine with that. And it seemed more if it's like an entire raid where you can't really use it, then that's a problem.
yeah, and they have looked into providing some kind of um, or keeping some of your like bear protection while shapeshifting out, but we're really concerned about what problems that could lead to. And there are pretty significant problems that could stem from that. Not the least of which is auto swift mending yourself, which would be really broken. So they know it's a problem. They're trying to figure out how to fix it, or at least address it in some manner. And they're hopeful that Merciless Vortex goes at least some distance in that direction. So, see what happens.
Yeah, at least it's on the radar.
Yep. So I think,
yeah, should we start moving on to mythic bosses?
I guess so. So we have 5 on the docket here. We'll see how many we actually get. And we almost. So we should have killed Zul like a week ago. We
and
just
like
decided
Americans had to have Thanksgiving and
no, not even that. we just had to like play extremely poorly on Fetid for 2 nights.
oh yeah,
which cost us a lot of time, like a lot of time, which is really unfortunate. But I mean that happens sometimes. It was kind of hilarious. Like we played like absolutely terribly on Fetid for 2 nights, and then we came back on Monday and just like obliterated them. And I was like, "What's going on?" And then we played terribly on Zul. Well, sort of terribly. Zul is very interesting. We'll save that discussion for when after we kill him. For now, we're going to take a trip back in time to when Mother
was progression.
actually a progression boss. So there's 2 different ways to do Mother. There's the way everyone did it on week 1, or not everyone. There's the way a lot of people did it on week 1, and then there's the way everyone did it on week 2 and later. We tried it the way everyone did it on week 1, or like first did it on week 1, which is basically the same way you do on Heroic. But then we ended up after a while we ended up trying the current strat, where everyone runs through the barrier at once and then sits there for 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And then you bring the boss through and then you repeat that process. That fight's really dumb. Like,
I mean, it's dumb how it was so easy to cheese.
but you have to. Spirit Link is a thing that exists. Like, you have to remember that Spirit Link exists, basically. And as long as Spirit Link exists, people will try to do these kinds of things. And this goes back eons, right? So basically what happens is one tank gets the boss the entire fight. That's usually me, because you're way better at dealing with ads. And during like the first 10 seconds of the fight, 15 people run through the barrier, and then you get to deal with ads for like 10 seconds, basically.
Yeah, and like in theory, a difference is that now different ads spawn depending on like what role runs through. Like tanks and healers spawn different ads. It ends up not being a thing. Like, if it is a thing, you did something wrong.
Yes, it's not to say the different ads don't exist. It's just they all die instantly.
Yeah,
well, pretty close to instantly. So you don't actually notice. And I think the thing you are most trying to do is like prevent our Frost Death Knight from killing himself, right?
Yeah,
basically.
That's the hardest part. Is like there's like 3 GCDs to maintain aggro, and then everything will be dead, including maybe your DPS who might have pulled aggro on you. So it's like abusing the whole thing where like Infernal Strike doesn't have a GCD, so it's like planting some AoE right there, And then this is the one fight where I use spell devastation because it's really fast threat. And then it's perfect for this fight because then you sit around doing nothing for a minute. You don't have to. I have nothing to spirit bomb against, so I guess I might as well go for the huge AOE burst cooldown. Only place I use it. And then that's the challenge of the whole fight.
Yes. Whereas I get to tank the boss pretty much. I do tank the boss the entire fight, and she hits decently hard. And once you after you learn, which should be very fast, that you can just not get hit by purifying strike, whatever it's called, ever. The challenge of staying alive quickly evaporates, and generally the group that stays over is the boss tank, 2 DPS and 2 healers, and then once that room's about to catch on fire, you cross over. Everyone sits in the second room until
Spirit Light comes back up.
Yeah, until healing cooldowns are back up, basically, and then you pop them all again, cross over again, and then kill the ads and the boss. That's the entire fight.
And I guess a big change that is actually noticeable is that the lasers happen at the same time. Like you have the up and down lasers.
The roof lasers are new, right? Are they new? No. They're in her. I think
they just alternate, and now they happen at the same time. So you have the circle lasers where you have to stand in a row at the same time as the up and down lasers, or I don't know directions. There's like
wall lasers and roof lasers.
Wall lasers, up and down lasers.
Yeah, and the wall lasers always go first. So the wall lasers always happen first, and then the roof lasers happen. In terms of boss positioning, this doesn't really change anything. Sometimes it'll overlap with Purifying Strike. If it does, you want to try and face it away from the raid. But other than that, and then once the lasers hit once the beams hit the ground, you can move, and you should do so because Purifying Flame happens right after lasers pretty much every time. So you don't want to be standing in that because that would be bad. And that's pretty much the entire fight, I think.
Yeah, it's not great. As far as my job is to stand around and dance for one room. And then the second room I do kind of mediocre DPS.
And honestly, I think we're getting pretty close to being able to kill it in 2. So, which would be pretty hilarious.
Yeah. Just make it short.
Yeah. In terms of what's going to kill you on this fight, if you're not a Blood Death Knight or a Brewmaster, you can, in theory, die to melee hits.
I definitely did when I was briefly tanking the boss before we switched our jobs around.
And yeah. And then if you're a Brewmaster, you pretty much only die if bad. So if you caught in the fire or you get caught in a beam. That's pretty consistent with how Brewmasters behave in this raid. So not really surprising. Brings us to Zek.
With the video, you can see how my dogs just kind of randomly roam around in my room all the time. They come around and check each other out, find some toy in here, and then either leave or chew on it. This is what I deal with. So.
There's just no cat in front of the camera.
Yeah, I don't know where he is right now. I'm surprised he's not here.
That brings us to Zekboz. Zekboz is probably going to be the third boss you're going to do in the raid. And it's out of... I don't think it's the most technical. There's definitely a lot of chances to screw up.
Mm-hmm.
For everyone in the raid, basically. But in terms of tanking, the only real change...
Like the ad spawn...
at the same time.
So the big tall caster ads spawn at the same time as little focusing warrior guys. And then they stop. So phases 1 and 2 are combined.
Yep. But combo's the same. Fracture does a lot more damage. Make sure you have negation up for it. Probably going to die. The combo itself doesn't really actually hurt that much. as long as you have AM up for it's not fracture, it's whatever, the physical hit, whatever it's called.
Shatter.
Shatter, yeah.
They use both those words an awful lot, so.
Yeah, as long as you have AM up for Shatter, you'll be fine. And otherwise, if you have like some sort of group control utility, like a grip, or like a knockback or something like that, you'll probably end up using it on the little ads.
Yeah, I think that was the big danger point, right? Was because those ads do a lot of damage to non-tanks, and so you want to prevent them from reaching the non-tanks as much as possible. Which means like a series of, I use Sigil of Chains to control them on the initial spawn, and then knocking them back with like Ring of Peace, or a
and Typhoon and Vortex. We have a Resto Druid Typhoon them into a Vortex like big, because that's a lot of control, like a lot of time they spend doing nothing.
Yeah. And then they die.
And then they're pretty much dead at that point. And then the caster ads obviously do the same thing you do on Heroic. You blah, 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 blah. Otherwise...
Like, the hardest part was when the abilities combine. At least for me...
And combo overlaps, right?
Yeah, so, like, if the combo happens when the big swirly circles happen, and you gotta communicate with your raid, and you probably have to use cooldowns because your healers are all moving and you're moving, or... ads are spawning during one of those things, or
yeah. So I basically set up alternating sack and spell wording on you for the overlaps of combo and dance, and that pretty much just solved that problem.
Spell wording's nice. This fight was the first place where I recognized how nice spell wording is. wait, I can just stand in the bad and nothing's gonna happen? All right.
Yeah, spell wording is pretty good on this fight, and obviously, sack's not that bad either. If you have some sort of like burst damage, wings, seraphim, avatar for a Rot Warrior or something like that, save it for the ads, so you can, or the little warrior ads, so you can help kill them quickly. Because the faster you kill those, it means the faster you can move on to the spiders, etc., etc. Otherwise, that's pretty much that's the fight. It's just making sure that you're not dying to combo, don't stand in the bad stuff, and don't kill the raid with combo. That's pretty much it. Mm-hmm. It doesn't change a lot from Heroic for tanking.
Yeah, just a little bit more complexity.
In terms of what's going to kill you, this is going to sound like a broken record. If you're not a Brewmaster, melee hits, presumably during dance when healers can't reach you, or shatter. I mean, that's the surprise. If you're Brewmaster, Void Lash is the thing that's going to kill you the most often, which again, not very surprising because Brewmaster's ability to mitigate and or stagger magic damage is not as good as it was. So, doesn't really surprise. But
yeah, what else? Is there any...
I think that's it for Zeklos.
Yeah.
Which brings us to Vectus, who is, of the first 5 bosses, is probably the most, requires the most coordination, I think. There's definitely big differences in terms of tanking. Although this largely depends on your strat, I think. Because the way we do it, we end up taking a lot of extra debuff stacks.
Yeah, basically this fight is there's a lot of mechanics in Mythic that I never had to pay attention to until Mythic.
Yes, very true.
Like suddenly the dots that happen are really important because if you get like at certain checkpoints at 6 and 12, bad things start happening. So you like actually you care about how many you get. Then you sometimes get the vector intentionally.
Yes.
I mean, previously that happened, but that was like not supposed to happen.
Yeah. Because there's 4 vectors now instead of 3, and because you only have 20 people out of, I don't know, however many you have in Heroic, a common strat is to have tanks intentionally take vector during intermissions, which is what we do. We intentionally take two of the group's vectors during intermissions and bounce them back and forth between ourselves. So we usually end up intentionally getting 3 stacks of lingering infection per intermission, give or take, depending on what happens. Which means dodging the bloodlines is way more important than it used to be.
And they're like fast, and suddenly positioning is really important because it's like, at least for the strat we were doing, where we have to like spread our debuff to each other, we have to be the closest people to each other at certain points.
Yes.
So that kind of might mean like, oh, you're soaking that pool. I got to be within so many yards of you, and that guy's like really close.
Yeah,
So
that happened more than once. And it's not uncommon for people to not like respect the bounce distance, like how a vector works during intermissions, which is, I mean, you can't really fault people for soaking, right? Because you have to soak or you're going to wipe. But sometimes it gets a little more scary than it needs to be. Although we try and combat that by not soaking puddles if at all humanly possible. And generally, I only soak doubles with bubble.
yeah,
If I'm soaking at all.
just because there's so many
Bubble,
complications.
yeah, because you can
Otherwise.
stand still in bubble and not get any stacks. So that's why it is very useful.
And the things that happen when you get extra stacks, like at 6, when he casts Contagion, I think.
Yes.
Then you start like bursting AoE around you, so you just have to spread out, which is relatively easy for the tanks to do because you have some room, and as long as like people know that they can't step into your space ever, that's fine. That was a little bit of learning curve for us, but
Yeah, I mean, I just got used to just yelling at people that got too close because the way the boss is positioned is like in the middle for basically piles of people, and you can't move the boss because that creates problems for melee. And if either the ranged groups on either side of you, because the melee are in the back, because they have to be, because thing, if either of them basically crowd you because you have so little room to move, they're basically dead. They're bursting. So they have to know that they can't be anywhere near you. And I mean, ours learned like really quickly to not do that. So
yeah.
hopefully it's
And
something
then
that people pick up on.
yeah, it wasn't so bad once people figure it out. And then at 12, which generally is kind of like try to avoid it, but sometimes just bad things happen.
12's really bad.
Yeah, you then start
Oh,
spawning
okay.
ads that have to be
Yeah,
killed
they
quickly.
kill you really fast.
So you really try to avoid it. It's not a raid wipe technically, but you know,
I mean, they'll kill people really fast. Like
bad stuff
they'll
might start
especially kill
happening.
tanks really fast.
Yeah.
Because all they're doing is just casting nature damage on you, and that compounded with the dot from the boss, compounded with lingering infection, can mean you take a lot of damage really fast. Just the easy way to avoid this is just not to get 12 stacks, pretty much.
Yeah.
So
The more
try to do
times
that
you
as
make
far
that
as you can.
mistake, the less it happens.
Yes. In terms of debuff swapping, so what we did during Heroic is we just swapped on every stack of the debuff. But we quickly learned doing Mythic that while definitely minimizes tank damage, it also makes it, unless you know the pattern inside and out, it makes knowing who is supposed to taunt the ad that spawns from whatever that ability is called, not suppression, I don't know, whatever it is, gestate, that's what it is. Ha. Makes knowing who is supposed to taunt the gestate ad, unless you know the pattern inside and out, really hard. So we just did it on 2 stacks. But I think we're at the point where we can just smack the ad with whatever, and we'll probably get it anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, speaking of the ad, like, I mean, the challenge with him is that is really just when he does the big bubble on everybody.
Yes.
Like, just defensively speaking, that's a good time to have active mitigation up.
Yes. I also find it's also a really good time just instantly pop whatever. So if you have a self healing ability, it's like a good time to instantly pop it, so you help break your shield as quickly as possible, so that you can be healed and don't die.
Yeah, and that was like kind of the dangerous part of this boss for me, at least. Was kind of figuring out that pattern and trying to alternate, or like trying to keep it so not any one of us had both the boss and the ad at the same time, because that's just a lot of damage going out, especially with the bubble. And then after that, the damage was very reasonable.
Yeah. And the last thing is, if you're a super mobile tank hunter, you can do fun stuff.
Oh yeah, you can pull him
From your
out
transition.
before he does the liquefy, and that just helps. Like I would listen for the 5 second countdown and then run away when it hit 5. Um, that helps so that when he drops the pool, not your whole raid is standing in it. They have a little bit of reaction time before it hits them.
Yeah, and it's I think it's random if he actually moves or not. But it allows you to kill the Jessid ad that spawns at the start of intermission without worrying about the pool. And in some cases, it also buys you like hilarious amounts of time if he like has to cross the entire room in movement, which gives healers insane amounts of time to catch up after the whatever the ability, the healing absorption bubble ability is. But going into that intermission is when at least we pick up the vectors from the two groups. And then we just bounce them back and forth, like we talked about before.
Yeah, and then like remember, hopefully no chaos happens where like you don't get 2 stacks. And then assuming everything goes smoothly, you just go back to your group, drop it off, someone picks it up, and you don't have to worry about it until the next intermission.
Yep. And you just repeat that 3 times and the boss dies. So, cool. In terms of what's going to kill you, if you're not a brewmaster, you're more likely to die to melee swing than the dot. If you're a brewmaster, you can see where I'm going with this. You are much more likely to die from the dot than melee swings. So, yeah. Continuing the trend.
I mean, I guess he hits pretty hard just over time, so melee's the big thing there, I guess.
Yep. So the last boss we have today is Fetid, who actually got nerfed today as well, but not in any way that matters to tanks. So this boss,
he's a scary guy. This Fetid guy.
So yeah, this guy is. There's two different kinds of damage that happens to tanks in the fight. One is very consistent, just auto attacks, which one tank has to deal with, and the other is very consistent physical damage spikes, which the other tank has to deal with. And I was actually I was watching Max's stream last few days. He was describing in pretty specific detail which tanks are better for which job.
Ooh, yeah, I'm interested in that stuff.
The best tank to tank the actual boss, just the regular auto hits, is the warrior, which should surprise nobody.
Yep, that makes sense.
The worst tank to tank the auto hits is a brewmaster, which should also surprise nobody. Or is a brewmaster or guardian? My guardian might be worst. I think brewmaster's 4. And guardian is guardian's the worst, followed by vengeance, and then brewmaster. Or maybe it's paladin, then brewmaster, then death knight. Anyway, the top 4 I don't remember the order, but I know warrior's definitely the best, and I'm pretty sure guardian's the worst. And then for the actual spikes, brewmaster is the best.
Yep.
And followed by Blood Decay. Paladin is really close as well. And
Good thing I made you do that, huh?
Vengeance is the worst,
Yeah.
which should surprise nobody. uh, and then I think Warriors 4 and Guardians 5. But you can have a double stack of iron for every 2 thrashes. So Guardian might actually be better. I don't know. But the upshot of that is, or maybe it's Blood Death Knight's the best. Anyway, Blood Death Knight and Brewmaster are very close to the top, and Vengeance is at the bottom for thrashes. Just because the Vengeance active mitigation bottle is not good for thrashes at all.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this when we were trying to figure out the fight, like which of us should do which role. And the real killer for me was that with Fiery Brand being on the GCD, like to prepare for a thrash, I have to sit there not pushing buttons and then wait for the thrash cast and push it, which is just like trash. Like, okay, now I have to not generate resources and wait for this thing to happen, and then to make sure my coverage is really great. Like, I just, it was terrible. And then Demon Spikes doesn't have, like it's pretty strong when it's up, but it doesn't have the best uptime, so you kind of have to figure out what to do when it's down, and it's terrible.
Yeah. So I was the one that ended up doing thrashes, and you tanked the boss. And it worked out pretty well, I think. There was some there was some problem solving at the start.
You had to figure out threat.
Yes.
Because at first I was trying the super defensive vengeance build, which is like feed the demon and like being able to proc into a demon and all that stuff. And then he kept pulling off me because vengeance is terrible DPS without fracture and spirit bomb. And so I kind of gave up on that. It's terrible. Like, I mean, this is part of just a gripe. Like, it frustrates me that my DPS is cut in, like, half because I don't have those 2 talents. Like, I feel like that is just too much of magnitude of change.
Yeah.
Like, how is it balanced that Vengeance DPS when they're on full DPS talents is on par with their tanks, and then their DPS when they have 0 of their DPS talents is just toilet bowl? I don't know. That seems unfair to me. So I went with my full DPS build, which just makes things a little bit like you got to be tighter with active mitigation usage, and can't get like too excited about the DPS stuff, but it still worked out.
Yeah, because the big problem I was having is I wasn't able to basically go through my normal rotation as much as possible in order to make sure try and have Avenger Shield up for as many thrashes as I could, which is a big problem. So because I needed that really badly to not die, and you ended up having to make that change, and I don't think it's necessarily bad. Like, it's just a problem that you may run into if you have tanks who are suited to different jobs and have very can sometimes have very disparate DPS outputs in opposite directions, if that makes any sense. So if, like, you have a prot warrior that for whatever reason their damage isn't all that great, and they're like constantly losing threat to like I don't know, a guardian or something. And that's such a dumb thing to say. But like, if you have a situation,
I mean, that was my problem on heroic in our alt run. My warrior losing threat, or my warrior could not hold threat on your paladin, but my warrior is also 30 item levels different than your paladin.
Yes, and like in like our also like full tilt. So that's also a big reason why.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in like Fetid and Zol, I am not full tilt DPS, and I definitely won't be for Mithrax and Cahoon. So like, there's a big difference there. But that is something you definitely have to watch out for on Fetid, because you want to make sure that you have appropriate tank for the appropriate job on that fight, because it'll make your life substantially easier, especially once you get into enrage, because sub 50% is not friendly. It's real scary.
Yeah, the best you can hope for is that it's fast.
Yeah, pretty much. The only real saving grace is that you have hero for most of it, so it tends to go by pretty quickly.
So how did you end up handling the thrashes?
I would shield the righteous every single one until I ran out of charges. This typically happened around the first ads or so, and then I would bubble to absorb 2, and then I would then have enough resources back to go through a whole cycle of shield the righteouses, and then use Ardent Defender, and then do the same thing, and then bop, and then do the same thing, and then Guardian, and thing, and then bubble again.
Okay, so kind of just weaving your big cooldowns around your active mitigation timing.
Yeah, and bop and bubble in that fight are just so good.
Yeah, that sounds nice.
Yeah, each one of those buys you two completely 0 damage thrashes, which is kind of nuts. And 6 out of, you generally take in the neighborhood of like 20 to 30 over the course of the fight. So being able to like completely negate 20% of those is pretty nut bar. It's pretty sweet.
And it's so much timing your AM when you're main tanking is like pretty straightforward. I would always try to focus it on when the healers were going to be stressed by other things. So like if you were taking a thrash, or if they were getting knocked back, or like some other kind of big event like that. And also just when bad things happened. If like yes. RNG I didn't parry enough hits that I got hit a bunch, then that's AM time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty much how it went. And one thing I really want to impress people who are just getting defeated, if you take a thrash with no active mitigation up, you will 100% die.
Yeah.
I can guarantee you. Unless you're, well, I mean, if you don't have bush ups, Death Knight, you're still going to die. But, like, if you don't have, like, if I take a thrash without shield or righteous up, I am dead. So, like, it's, at this point, it's barely enough to kill me, but I will still die. Even if I'm sending a consecration and stuff like that. So, like, it's not a joke. You really have to be paying attention and planning as much as possible. And rationing out your active mitigation as much as you humanly can to make sure that it's up for as many of them as you can, and then saving your cooldowns for the rest.
Mm-hmm. This was a huge lesson in rationing active mitigation.
Yes.
Since we're both tanking 100% of the time for the whole however long the fight lasts, you learn pretty quickly that if you're like overzealous with like, oh, I'm just gonna smooth this one out, it'll be fine, that's gonna bite you later when you have nothing up.
And a couple other important points about Fetid. The first is, if tanking thrashes is substantially easier when your DPS don't suck. By that I mean when your DPS are actually able to kill the ads within the time that they're supposed to, and he doesn't run off and try and eat them, it's substantially easier to know when thrashes are going to happen. Because there are times, like if he runs off to eat an ad, he can actually thrash you from 20 yards away. Just because that's when it's going to happen. And that's killed me more than once.
That's so hard to predict.
Yes. Which is why I would always be very unhappy with DPS when they failed to kill their ad in time.
Yeah.
The other, and I guess we'll talk about positioning briefly. So there's a couple different ways to position the boss. The first of which is you tank him against the wall pretty much the entire time. Not the wall. One of the like kind of wall, the kind of wall protrusions, I guess. I don't know, of like the alcoves. This makes it significantly easier for tanks to control the position of the boss, so that he doesn't dramatically change what he's doing mid-fight, And this is a good thing if you have large numbers of melee. On our first kill, we had 6 melee, which meant it would have been extremely difficult to try the other method, which is dragging him to each big ad or getting punted to each big ad for additional cleave. It's going to be kind of up to you and your raid to figure out what you want to do. But if you have a high... you cannot bring more than 6 melee. It's just not possible. Well, okay, it's probably possible. It's a really bad idea.
Yeah, like those big old circles are tough.
Yes. So if you are bringing lots of melee, you will probably want stationary. If you're not bringing lots of melee, then moving around becomes significantly easier. So what you end up doing is kind of up to you, but that is kind of how it is. And the circles. The last thing I want to talk about is the circles. Going back to melee again, depending on the number of melee you have, it's possible that you can get crowded by the circles. I will mention that if you both get it, I mean, if one of you gets a debuff, you're both going to get it. If you both get whatever the debuff is, it's theoretically possible to reset, go through the entire duration of the debuff and reset. It's extremely difficult. We have done it before.
Yeah.
I would not recommend it.
Yeah, it's more of a you do it because you have to. And the big problem is, you get the little circle on you for the duration. That's fine. You just spread out the little circles. But then before it explodes, you get the big circle. And that's a huge way to spread out. And you kind of have to assume, no melee is going to be within thrash range while this happens, right? Hopefully not.
Yeah. So you still have to somehow be the tank taking the regular melee hits, so that none of the melee die. And that's largely up to the melee to not screw up. You have to go as far away as you have to go to manage the circles. And if a melee screws up and dies, well, there's nothing you can do about that. The best way to handle that is to prevent it happening entirely, which again is almost entirely on your melee, to not jump on top of you. So there's something to be aware of. And you never really have to worry about breath. As far as I know, it can't actually target tanks, so you never really have to worry about it.
Yeah, that was an issue.
In terms of what's going to kill you on this fight, this is actually pretty niche, and I think it kind of reflects what jobs each tank does in the fight. For Blood Decay, they're going to die to Thrash more often than melee, because Blood Decays take Thrashes more often than they take melee hits. Guardian is about 50-50, so Guardians are pretty evenly split between doing the jobs. Brewmasters take Thrashes die from Thrash way more often than melee hits, because again, Brewmasters are really good at doing Thrashes. Paladins die way more often than Thrashes than melee, because Paladins are exceptionally bad at tanking the boss, because our maintained AM uptime is so bad. But our individual time slice for individual hit up AM uptime is really good. Warrior is going to die way more often to melees than Thrashes. Even though they're pretty okay at Thrashes, they're far and away way better at doing melee hits, so obviously they're going to take more melee hits. And then Vengeance dies to melee hits way more often than Thrash, because they're so terrible at Thrash.
And I love the scale of it. Okay, Paladins and VDH definitely don't ever swap jobs.
Yeah.
Everyone else might be swapping jobs. Those two definitely aren't. But everyone else is kind of favored on one thing or another.
Yep. All right, so we got through all 5 bosses.
Yeah, we did it.
And some other stuff. I don't have anything else to add. Do you?
I think we're good. That's just about at our 1 hour time block, too.
Yep.
Like professionals.
Professional. So I'm gonna try and I don't know when the MP3 is gonna go up. It'll go up at some point. But there will be an MP3. It will go up. Don't worry about that. Next show is going to be not this upcoming weekend, but the weekend after. And it'll be the Uldir Retro with our friends, Sweetbag and Grafarian. So that's gonna be really fun. It's always really fun. This is kind of like a what's the word? Tradition. That's the word I'm looking for. It's a tradition. I think we started. I want to say an HFC. We've been doing it for like 2.5 expansions now.
We got
Which is pretty nuts.
yeah, while Midwinter was still on our server, so we were like, hey, we're basically like siblings as far as guilds go.
Yeah, and that'll be really fun. And then we'll see what happens after that. The following show, we should have a couple more bosses to talk about, hopefully before Christmas. And then, yeah, see what happens.
Yeah. And then we have like the next raid, maybe next year.
Yeah, next year probably. At some point, anyway. Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for listening / watching, whatever you did.
Yeah, this was fun. I like the visual aspect of it because then it's like I can see when people are talking. I don't know. There's like body language when people are like approaching being done with their statement.
Oh, I never thought of that.
Yeah, I do like that aspect, especially like if we ever have guests. I kind of want to try this again, but we'll see how easy it is to like promote, like make an MP3 of this and everything.
Yeah. I like the fact that you took on all the technical aspects, and I didn't really have to do anything.
I know. Who would have thought I'd do that? That's crazy.
Not me. That's for sure.
Well, I was inspired because my husband listens to a lot of podcasts, and I was like, these sound really good. What are they doing? Oh, they're recording on Twitch first, and that's why everyone's so enthusiastic while recording, and then he knows Twitch stuff a little bit better than I do, so he kind of walked me through it, and hopefully it will work.
Yeah. No, I like it. I was like a little nervous at first because I don't know. I just always get nervous doing things in front of a crowd, but turned out really good. So yeah, I had fun.
All right, maybe we can do this again sometime. So
yeah.
Okay.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Good luck on your mythic bosses. Okay. I guess I gotta end all this stuff. So bye for reals.
All right.